All right. Hello there, Brian. Hello out there, everyone. Just quick introduction. I'm CV, and my channel is The Reconverted Catholic. Today I have Bryan Mercier, or correctly pronounced actually Mercier. He has a channel called Catholic Truth, and I've been following this channel for some time, subscribe to it, really enjoy his videos, his content. He seems to have a really good finger on the pulse of, discussing the Catholic faith and challenges against the Catholic faith and addressing those. And so I highly encourage checking out his channel. Again, it's called Catholic Truth, and I'll have a link to it down here in the video. Today's topic will be about spiritual but not religious, and including dialoguing with the nuns. I have a video series, a short series I call Dialoguing with Doubters. That includes that as a component, like having a conversation, a primer for fellow Catholic Christians if they're dialoguing with people who identify as spiritual but not religious. And I also had a awesome conversation with a gentleman named Pat Flynn. He also has a YouTube channel, and he's been on a Pints with Aquinas and EWTN and a few channels. Outstanding philosopher too. So we actually talked a little bit on the subject, but I definitely like to get your thoughts, Brian, because you have a couple of videos related to this, including one you just did again recently within the last week or so about Deepak Chopra, who seems to have a big influence on the sort of spiritual but not religious world out there. What that all means. So first up, Brian, I know I gave a little introduction about you, but if you want to tell us a little about yourself, about your Catholic journey. And
Sure. My name is Bryan, and I grew up Catholic, oldest of 6 children, went to church every Sunday, confession, prayed every day, but, it really didn't sink down into my heart. And I ended up getting very much bullied in high school, kind of abused a lot, getting angry, started dressing in black, carrying weapons, hating everybody, hating myself, hating life. And that was my life for about 7 years until my mom didn't know what else to do with me anymore. So she shipped me off, in a sense, to a Catholic college, Franciscan University, one of the best in America, to try to get some Jesus in me or something. And so I ended up going out there, having a really powerful St. Paul style conversion, and really loved God with all my heart, transformed by Jesus, took out all the hate and the rage and the sadness, and he just replaced it with love, joy, happiness, overflowing peace and fulfillment. And it was at that time that I started telling everybody about Jesus. And I ran into a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses on the street corners around that time, Protestants of different sects, telling me that the Catholic Church was evil, that the Catholic Church was wrong. And I decided that I didn't know my faith at all. I couldn't defend it or explain it, to a minimal degree. And so I ended up going on search for my faith over the next 20 years and looking up all the answers, reading all the books I could, getting degrees in theology and things like that, just so I could know my faith and share it with others as much as possible. And all along this time, I gave many retreats, confirmation retreats, parish missions, that sort of thing. And eventually I came down to the fact that, our church is in trouble. Everywhere I look, there's people like me who are angry, broken, sad, lonely, depressed, anxious, and many other things. We're struggling as a society. And then on the other hand, our church is in trouble. Our church is confused a lot of times from the top down. Many priests and even bishops are sometimes confused in presenting teachings that aren't actually Catholic. And many Catholics don't know what to believe. And so I started an organization called Catholic Truth, where anyone at any time from anywhere can come to know exactly what the Catholic Church teaches and why. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to figure out what the truth is. We don't have to make it up. We don't have to try to say, oh, well, maybe it meant this. The church already has taught the truth of Jesus Christ for 2,000 years. And that truth can change the world. We just need to present it. So our mission at Catholic Truth is twofold: to help people to know their faith, love their faith, and to live it and to defend it, to be able to explain it, and to help other religions to know Catholicism as well. And then on the other hand, to help people at a personal level, to help them to be transformed in Christ as I was, and help them to find the truth of who they are and to find that happiness and that fulfillment that we're all meant to have in this life and or in the next.
Yeah, that's real talk too. I've struggled a little bit with this, and that could be a conversation for another time, deep dive conversation about that, because on one hand, it's almost like, I kind of want to, as a devout Catholic, active Catholic, being very much in touch with that truth of what you speak, that sometimes I kind of want to plug my ears to the problems, like, la, 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 we're not really having this issue, or we're not having any kind of crises. But then, yeah, sure, there's some mixed information and understanding, and you have to dive into those tough, dark places, and and have the conversations. We can't avoid the conversation. So I'm glad that that you step up and do that, because it's important to have that out there for sure.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. So let's dive a bit into the topic today about spiritual, not religious. So I've enjoyed the videos that you've put out regarding this topic, and I have my own thoughts on this. And I'd like to get first from your perspective. Number one, what do you think is, let's go through, say, a couple of the core reasons, primary reasons why people have either left a faith tradition, and particularly like the Catholic faith, or have moved from, something to now spiritual but not religious. What do you think is a core reason why, from your perspective, why are people doing this? Yeah.
And I'm going to give a shameless self plug. I wrote a book called Why Do You Believe in God? And it's actually 15 real conversations I've had with atheists, agnostics, people who have left the church, doubters, skeptics, people who have questions. So you literally get to hear the people, their objections, what I say, their responses, what my response is. And basically, you can see why people leave the church. And I give a lot of extra notes in here going through reasons why people leave the church. And for me, there's a bunch of them, but two main ones come to the front. And that's number one, we've done a terrible job of catechizing people over the last 50 years. And to be fair, it's not the church's job to catechize people's kids. Back in the day, we used to teach our kids the faith. But since the kind of free love 1960s, 70s hippy dippy generation, and we've kind of fallen off the Catholic scale, we've ceased to pass on our faith in many ways. And we've ceased to teach our kids the faith. And then we put them in religious education and we say, oh, well, they have that. But who goes to math one day a week for 1 hour? Who learns English one day a week for 1 hour? Nobody's going to learn it. And even if they do, they're not going to retain it. So we haven't done a good job over the last 50 years passing on the faith, really instructing our children. And so if you don't know, like, for example, I was the kind of guy who always asked questions. How do we know that God exists? How do we know that Jesus, really did miracles? How do we know? Why would God send people to hell if he loves them? Why doesn't God answer our prayers? Like, good questions. And people would just say, Bryan, you just have to believe. You just have to have more faith. Bryan, God's a mystery. And so I got mad, and I would just basically say that you don't know the answer to these questions. So just get out of my face, and it got me angry. And so I had to go look up all the answers for myself because I don't like to blindly believe. But the fact is, we have an age that is not only not intellectual, but it's weirdly coupled with the fact that they're very cynical, skeptical, and they like to see. They're not going to just believe stuff because they're told to. They actually need real answers. They need things that make sense. They don't want it watered down. And when they hear the answers and they make sense, so many people have told me I never would have left the church. I've had teens tell me I would have gone to church a long time ago if I knew that. And so I really think if we teach people the faith, they're going to not leave it, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. It just seems like old hocus pocus superstition. And then the second reason is because we have failed to teach people how to pray. We have failed to teach people how to have a deep spiritual life where they can connect with God. And so they don't connect with God. They pray maybe their childhood, maybe they pray for a long time. They don't get most of their prayers answered. So they conclude that God's not real, or God doesn't love them, or he's just indifferent. And people, they don't teach us how to grapple with these things, how to make sense of it all. So I really feel like the knowledge aspect and the spiritual aspect over the last 50 years in our church have been very lacking. And now many people are leaving and graduating from confirmation and walking away like never before because our culture has said, and this is another reason too, is our culture is destroying us on all sides. 4 out of 5 kids will lose their faith in college, even if they went to youth group, even if they went to church every Sunday. They're just, it's a moral cesspool of filth on every side of us. And if we're not equipped and we're not trained and we're not given the tools we need, and we're not we're never going to be able to survive this culture. And that's part of the problem why so many people are walking away, including adults, because a lot of adults have questions too, and they don't know where to really turn to give answers, because the church is not really as authoritative as she used to be. And it's actually confusing many people. I mean, she is as authoritative as she used to be, but she's not acting as authoritative as she used to be.
I gotcha. Yeah, that's and it's an alarming statistic for sure. Let's talk a
And
bit.
there's many more. I mean, three-quarters of millennials,
Yeah.
sorry, one more. Three
Oh, go
quarters
ahead.
of millennials say that they don't have faith or they don't practice the faith. So we're talking ages 18 to 35, three-quarters of that generation doesn't practice the faith or has no faith at all. Like, that's scary.
Right, and then when you combine that with the first point of not being properly catechized, it's you have kind of a perfect storm of problems with.
Exactly.
Let's talk a bit more about that second point too, about prayer life and connecting with, God and the spiritual life. In my conversation with Pat Flynn the other day, we covered a little bit about, addressing spiritual, not religious, and we talked. I put it all under one category, okay, sort of one umbrella of what I call "what's in it for me" spirituality. Because it is very kind of driven to. In fact, I had referred to a video that, Brian Holdsworth, he has a channel out there and he gives, he did a video a couple of weeks ago. This seems to be interesting because it seems to be becoming more prominent in conversations about subjective truth versus objective truth in many different arenas, right? So he does a whole video on this and he articulates it really well, the problem. And he
I
explains.
was just about to do a video on that too.
Really? Yeah. I highly encourage it because I think we need more videos of that, of explaining a difference of, in my understanding of, and I mentioned this conversation the other day, of growing up, being raised Catholic and understanding our faith and tradition, that, Mass, for example, that's being in communion with God. It's looking out to God. It's connecting with the Eucharist, the central part of the Mass, and having this experience of connecting with God and being, as I'll say, as Pat even said the other day, being assimilated into Christ, versus sort of the other way around. Whereas, so you're looking more outward spirituality versus this sort of very growing trend of like, what is going to work best for me if I kind of pick from different bins, right? When I'm shopping, and if I put it all together, I can create something that is my truth or my spirituality thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's all across the board. That's not just teenagers, that's adults.
Right.
That's Protestantism in a nutshell definition. Like I've had so many people, and I did a whole video on this on our Catholic Truth channel, but who has true worship, Catholics or Protestants? And I talk about all the Catholics who left the faith because they weren't fed, and they wanted to go someplace that would feed them and be better for them. And really, it was only about 3 months to 6 months before they ended up leaving that Protestant church for another one because they weren't fed, and then another one, and then another one. And it really, like you said, it just becomes subjective. It's all about me. It's all about what I get out of it. It's, if it's not feeding me the way I need instead of what's actually true, then it's basically you. Church is supposed to change you. You're not supposed to try to change the church.
Right.
The Bible is supposed to try to change you, but today we have people try to change the Bible because it doesn't fit them, but the reality is Jesus feeds us and he gives us truth. And if we follow that truth and understand it, we're not going to be trying to make all of our different truths. And many of us, especially when you get into like foofy stuff like the New Age, or I'm spiritual but not religious, like many of these people have already walked away from the faith. They don't have anything, but we are made as spiritual beings. We're supposed to have something, and so we desire something. But once we've walked away from the truth, anything seems true. And so we start trying to look for it in different ways and piece it together ourselves. In a sense, we try to find the truth instead of accepting the truth that's already given us, which is why people need to be evangelized to realize that Jesus already gave us the map. He gave us the path and we just have to follow it, and anything else is not going to fulfill us.
Yeah, and when I look at this, I approach it from a couple of other different angles as well. I have my own, what I call, it is a reconversion story, or reversion story on my channel. It's one of the first few videos I put out, and it's 3 parts. There's a lot involved with it, and me jumping around and doing some seeking, including some time as a Protestant for about 5 years. And then I was a full-on, I call a pretty hardcore atheist for about 10 years, and pretty outspoken about it. So, and then I reverted to being Catholic in 2014. So it's been some time, but during that time that I was a pretty outspoken atheist and being really critical of religion, you know, and to your point, and why I partly why I appreciate your videos, which you put out there, the content you put out there, is it can be kind of controversial and kind of a tough subject. And it's like, I know in sort of in both camps, Catholic and then Protestant, not wanting to ruffle too many feathers or whatnot. But what I can say, if I strip it all down, a lot of my aversions, okay, to the Bible and spiritual life and Christ and God, you know, and the triune God, etc., was a reaction to purely literal understandings of the Bible, or very sort of, you know, fundamentalist, or even because 30,000 sects of Christianity, you know, of Protestant Christianity, and then all the different sort of understandings, right, interpretations based on that, you know, then picking that apart, and often based on, you know, literal understandings. So I found that I was attacking that a lot, actually, even as an atheist. And I even find other atheists, agnostics, etc., seems a lot of their hang up, if you put aside like rules in the Catholic Church, where some people are hung up about that, what they call organized religion, a lot of it, the theological part of it, is very much rooted, I hate to say it, in sort of a Protestant understanding of the Bible and Christian life. I mean, I don't want to have to say that out loud, you know, but I was even in that camp, you know, and I had kind of blinders on because of it, you know, so.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that last point that you made. Another reason people try to make their own truth is because they don't like the actual truth. You know, they don't like a particular moral teaching, or they don't like anybody telling them what to do, and so they kind of go make themselves pope, or they make themselves God. They kind of try to figure out what, I don't like that truth, so I'm going to go make my own truth. And anytime we do this, it's never going to make us happy, you know, because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, you know. And if we don't follow Jesus, we're not going to have the way, we're not going to have the truth, and we're not going to have the life, which makes us happy. But I agree with you as well that a lot of people have misunderstandings about the Bible, about church teaching. And it doesn't really, especially modern day, you know, they say, oh, well, Jesus, how the science says that, you know, 13.7 billion years ago, there was a big bang that created the universe, but the Bible says it's 7 literal days. You know, the science has a lot of good facts to say that evolution is true, whereas the Bible said, no, it's Adam and Eve. And so, you know, if you're going to take the two, I'm not going to take the one that's 5, 10, 15,000 years old and based on faith with no actual fact. I'm going to go with the actual facts of science. So a lot of people have this understanding that science is fact, religion's not, when in fact we wouldn't even have science if it wasn't for religion, because the Catholic Church forwarded science for over 1,000 years, more than any organization on earth. But they can go together. But many people, like you said, don't know that. And I believe the majority of atheism comes from misunderstandings of a lot of these things. Hence my first point.
Oh, yeah, and then devolving into scientism, right, you know, into
Exactly.
your becomes so, yeah, absorbed into that, and yeah, and not balancing, as we're familiar with as Catholics, faith and reason, you know, balancing together.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little more about, again, kind of going back to some of the spiritual, not religious movement, and that, well, there are different forms of that mentality, but and again, we talked a little earlier about the video that you released again within the last week or two about Deepak Chopra. And I agree on many levels, or I disagree. I agree with you, actually, all your points on many levels. And then also what I've called, I know this can sound a bit snarky too, you know, what I've called the Oprah Winfrey generation, you know, whether you like Oprah or not, the two, but in the last 25 to 30 years, even some of the languaging that sort of came out of her program, and, you know, really, again, a lot of finding your spirit and a lot of connecting with what's inside here and building a spiritual life based on that. And then your Deepak Chopras and some other folks have then sort of even expanded on that in very like abstract, you know, esoteric, you know, ways, trying to explain, you know, well, including, in fact, you even mentioned, I believe, in your video, because he has a book out there too, where he really waters down Christ to, you know, just, again, just sort of like, well, kind of a wise teacher, but maybe it was even just a sort of, you know, there are mythicists, right, out there who believe that maybe Christ didn't even exist at all. So not to go in too many directions, but let's get a little more of your thoughts about that, how that applies, like the influence on spiritual, not religious, you know, different, you could say, leaders out there, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Oprah is definitely a new age guru wannabe. Her show is infested with new age, and ever since she got into that, she's kind of gone down, down, down. And she's had a lot of the biggest new age gurus on there. I mean, she loves Eckhart Tolle, and she loves the Course in Miracles, and um, Father Richard Rohr. I just did a video on him. He's like a new age priest as well, who's been on Oprah, or is at least loved by Oprah, and Deepak Chopra, and all of these kind of new age gurus she's had on. I mean, she has a spiritual book club, which is mostly new age teachings. And it's sad because she has a big platform, but this is kind of what we, as you said, we've devolved into. Um, like deep, it's kind of hard to say because like once you leave truth, then anything can become true. As I said, like Deepak Chopra, he said he decides what the truth is, apparently, and Father Richard Rohr, who's supposed to be a Catholic priest, decides what the truth is. Or, pick your person, each person has to decide what their truth is. And it's basically New Age, and New Age is pulling from all different sorts of, I mean, it's basically syncretism, taken from all different religions. It's like Bruce Lee pulled from different martial arts it made a whole art that he liked, pulling from all the parts. And so New Age does the same thing. They pull from Christianity and Hinduism, Buddhism, and the occult, and the spiritualism, philosophy, Gnosticism. I mean, you name it. It's just a blend of everything, and nothing's really better than the other. We're all kind of the same. Even Protestants have this mentality. You're not better than me. I'm not better than you. If you look at a dog in the dark, or an elephant, some people say in the dark, everyone's groping around. Somebody feels, an ear. Somebody feels the elephant's leg. Someone feels the elephant's stomach. We each have a part of the truth, but nobody has a hold on the whole truth. And this is a false belief all the way across the board, from New Ageism to Protestantism. And the reality is Jesus Christ is the full truth, and he gave his full truth to the Catholic Church 2,000 years ago. And it existed for 1,500 years before Protestants ever broke away and fragmented that truth. So maybe in Protestantism, each of them have a little bit of the truth, but it all can be found in Catholicism. And when you get to people like Deepak Chopra, who are just people who are spiritual and not religious, I mean, they're the type of people who say, well, God's more spiritual, and you have to be spiritual yourself. You have to find your inner New Age enlightenment. And that means you don't adhere to dogmas. You don't adhere to doctrines. There's no commandments. There's no do this, do that. There's no good and evil, right and wrong, good and bad. All of those are part of what they call dualistic thinking. The reality is there's only God, and he's a loving God. We're all part of that God. We're all one family. We can all stand around a campfire and sing Kumbaya together. We just have to love each other. So, any commandments, original sin, hell, devil, that's all made up by Christianity. The real, true spiritual truth is that we're all part of the one essence of God, the energy of the universe. And once we realize that, we can make peace with ourselves, with each other, and with our universe. We can start to heal ourselves, each other, and our universe. And so this is kind of the, a nutshell version of how they think of it, how they get into it. It's really not about creeds. It's not about commandments. It's just about how you feel. It's subjective. It's not objective. It's how I feel. And each person feels different and contradicts each other, but it doesn't matter because we should just all love each other.
Right. Yeah, it makes me think a point you made now regarding truth, and then one earlier you made earlier. If a lot of people aren't being taught a correct objective truth, and then they're just spinning into, again, sort of what I call Baskin Robbins, also, shopping for for spirituality, right? And then you combine that with that spiritual but not religious. One concern that I have with it and the movement, and social media, adds to this a lot, helps perpetuate this, is life and spirituality being reduced to memes and platitudes. It's and a whole lot of self-help, self-transformation, sort of geared to spiritual but not religious, thinking, where you have a million different books with a million different ideas on how to live your life. Many of them are very similar, like they cross over, right? But it's so interesting how even a lot of that information is, we can find those answers within our own faith. these are really not actually new ideas of how to be. Like if you take something like a Four Agreements kind of idea, or even other books or spiritual resources, which can be, they have value and they can have some of their utility, right? But then you also see a problem that if people aren't finding that in our faith tradition, which is so rich in not only in what we believe, but philosophy, and even as you mentioned, even how spawn science, and such a, and it's so much over 2,000 years of answering a lot of the questions we're still asking, and even how to live and be centered in our lives, but to your point, right, it's, find a lot of people drifting because they don't think it's there in the first place, like here in the Catholic faith, you know what I mean? Like I have to go pick up this book because there isn't something here that's really going to explain that as far as how to go about your life and and live it. So
Yeah, I just looked up.
yeah.
I actually just wrote another book, if you don't mind me shamelessly.
Go for it, do it. Yeah.
It fits with what you just said, but it's called Counterfeit Spirituality:
Oh,
Exposing False Gods.
yeah.
And it's literally what you just said. It's just people who have gone off the trails. They've gone away from faith. They've gone away from religion, or just true religion in general. And they've kind of got into these other alternative religions, or self-help, or new age, or something like that. And I've recognized that most Catholics can't differentiate between the true and the counterfeit. They pick up a self-help book, they pick up just a spiritual book because they truly have a desire to want to grow closer to God. But all of these things, while you said they overlap and have some core truths, they also disagree with each other too, and have different ways of going about that. So which one's right, which one's true? They don't know the difference. They can't discern the difference. And so I wrote this book to help them discern what is true and what is false, what comes from God and what doesn't, because it really comes down to the fact that if we're not in the truth, we're not walking toward heaven. Jesus says there's two roads. One leads to heaven and the other leads to hell. There's nothing in between. And I know, if you guys could see my bookshelves over, I have so many bookshelves around the room, and I have tons of new age books, self-help books. And these are the people who are being promoted in the workplaces, people like Wayne Dyer.
Yeah.
Just for example, he is a really popular man who's giving like thousands and thousands of people, and probably maybe hundreds of thousands each year. He's going into business meetings and top executives and teaching them how to meditate, teaching them to find their oneness, teaching them to connect with the universe. And I mean, all of these books start out with, you want more money, that's great. You're not fulfilled, we can help you. You want the best relationship, you haven't found love yet, there's a reason for that. And so, there's two different types of books, but the one really wants to motivate you. They want you to help find these things, but they're spiritual books that do it in the wrong way. It leads you astray. They start motivational, but then they get spiritual. Books like The Secret, which teach you like the law of attraction. It's like you can have all the power and money and fame and everything you want. You just have to think more positively. Let us teach you how to do that. Sky's the limit, whatever you want. And to people who don't have spirituality, they love this stuff because they're dying for it. They don't have Jesus in their heart, so they're starving for some spirituality, and this feeds them. But unfortunately, it's not true, and it leads in the opposite direction. It's a false counterfeit. And if I gave you real money and counterfeit money, you'd probably have a hard time understanding the difference. In fact, bank executives used to have to count money every day for 8 hours for 7 straight days. At the end of the week, they started slipping in counterfeit dollar bills, or not dollar bills, but bigger bills. And immediately they could detect the counterfeit because they were so used to knowing what the real bill was. And so if we don't really know what the real thing is, we'll never be able to spot the counterfeit. It all looks the same.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Yeah, I like that. And I think, and just I'll add something real quick, that there's this attractiveness, this allure to it. It's exciting, it's different, it's new, it's mystical, it's metaphysical, which is a term that used to be thrown out in many different areas and ways. But yeah, and the way it's marketed, like The Secret. It's funny you mentioned The Secret. I read something about this shortly after the time it came out, And it was, yeah, and I actually then ended up reading the book, and yeah, I had, and this was actually the time when I was an atheist, and I had a lot of problems with it, not even from the metaphysical standpoint. There were just a lot of holes in, in reading it, right? But then I read about a commentary about it and how it was so brilliantly marketed, right? Because who doesn't want to know the secret? That was the point, right? Like, of course, everybody's going to want to seek it out and find it out. So that,
Right.
so it seems like in the spiritual but not religious world, there's also a lot of marketing, right? A lot of sort of clever marketing to get people to see, like, here's something maybe you haven't considered before, right? And that isn't necessarily true, but it's exciting and it's
Hmm.
different, right?
Yeah.
Oh, also a request. Could you please drop the names of the books in the chat here or send them to me? Because I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to get them. And two, I have another little segment, right, in my channel, which is still growing slowly but surely and getting off the ground. I like to do recommended reading videos. I've done some already, so I'd actually like to include those in my takeaways for that. Because,
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
yeah, so I'll go
Absolutely.
out and get them and then, yeah, appreciate that. So what have you found then? As a teaching tool? What have you found to be, and we talked about, catechism earlier, right? And the lack of that, or right now, the problem with that. But what have you found if you've dialogued with people who fall into that sort of spiritual but not religious camp or something related to that, or the nuns, let's even just call it the nuns in general.
Yeah.
What have you found like a couple of effective teaching tools to reconsider, truth, how truth is defined?
Yeah, it's a good question because um, many of them are very subjective, as we said earlier. They're
Yeah.
very emotional in what they believe. I believe most atheism is emotional atheism, meaning it's not deeply intellectual. They haven't really studied it. They just don't like something, didn't want to believe something, became slothful and fell away from something. So each person's coming from a different area, different way, a different point of view. So my best evangelization advice is to figure out where the person's coming from first. Why do they believe what they believe? If you say, if someone says, I don't believe in God, I always say, that's very interesting. Why not? And it could be range from anything. Well, I don't believe in a God who goes around killing everybody. Okay, I don't believe in that kind of a God either. Like, what's your next point? So, or it could be like, well, I don't believe in following the rules. Which rules? All the rules. The church has too many rules.
Yeah.
So rules are bad? Yeah, they're really bad. I don't like rules. Okay, well, do you hate America then? I mean, because we have rules every day. You can't beat your wife. You can't steal things. You have to stop at red lights. I mean, this country is built on rules and laws. Every country is. That's how society lives. I mean, so you're saying you don't like that. So, it doesn't fit. So what specifically, do you not like? And they usually get down to like, well, I don't like the fact that I can't have sex before marriage, or homosexuality, or it comes down to some specific thing that they want to do that they can't. But once you find out what they don't like, or it could have been something like, oh, well, I was abused in the church. I didn't like this person and they were mean to me, so I left. Okay, well, you deal with that person a whole different way. But until you can get down to the nitty gritty core aspect of why they don't believe, don't want to believe, or they don't accept traditional Catholicism, then you can't really help them. You're just, oh, well, you guys had the Crusades. You answer that, and then they're on to the next thing. You answer that, they're on to the next thing, because those aren't the real issues. Those are just smoke screens. And pro tip apologetics always shoots to figure out why the person believes the way they do and try to answer that core issue. I mean, I answered one of my conversations in my book, Why Do You Believe in God? I discussed with an atheist from Texas for 45 minutes. He kept asking me for proof for God. And every time I get it, he cut me off and told all the reasons why he didn't believe in God. And after 45 minutes, I just let him talk and talk and talk. And at the end of it, he said, are you going to say anything? I said, sure. Thanks for the opportunity. And then I went in and started discussing. And he's like, you actually make a lot of good points, which I've never considered before. He's like, let me tell you my real issue with God and Christianity. I said, aha, here we go. An hour into the conversation, and we're finally getting to his real issue. And he says, I hate that fact that God allows suffering. I have a hard time with understanding why God, if he's real, allows suffering. Boom. Now we can discuss this. And we did. And he was just completely silent. And he said, I'm just going to go think about this stuff. You make a lot of good points. And I think that's the issue, is we can't just take people's anger and smoke screens and stuff. We have to figure out what they want. And we have to evangelize the person of Jesus Christ, who's not just a New Age guru. He's not just Buddha. He's not just Mohammed. He's not just another great leader. He's the way, the truth, and the life. He healed people's blindness, walked on water, calmed storms, healed the possessed people, rose from the dead, rose himself from the dead. I always tell people, name one other person in history who has that kind of resume. I mean, if he claims to be the truth, either he is or he isn't. And I try to get it all back to the person of Jesus Christ and whether it's true or not.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's really well stated too. Yeah, it also makes me think that, and it's funny how oftentimes something that starts as a sweeping claim, right? It seems to start a lot with some sweeping generalization, like, yeah, the Catholic Church has too many rules, and then just how you then, right, you learn where they're coming from with that, but you have to get past just the big, broad statement, right, of this, or I don't agree with, yeah, why does God allow suffering or evil, or, there are too many rules, and what, yeah, okay, well, one, it's not only broad, but yeah, exactly. Sometimes there's something underlying it, like when you really get to the heart of it. It's
like just one rule. A lot of times it's just one rule, and they just broadly categorize it.
Right. Yeah, which is yeah, that's a whole kind of mess in itself, no doubt.
It is, but I think I just want to say in conclusion here,
Yeah, yeah,
that Jesus Christ taught us specifically that we need to pick up our cross and follow him.
that's right.
He taught us specifically in Matthew 19, 1 John 2, 3, and 4, and many verses in the Bible, that if we ever want to even have a hope to go to heaven, we have to follow the commandments. We have to follow the teachings that he gave us. He said there's only one path, and it's the path he gave us. So while some people are in the church are rigid and mean and robotic and jerks, which, the new agey people accuse us of being, that is true. The other, you don't swing the pendulum to the other side and just say you have to be nice and it doesn't matter what you believe. True Christianity says that we need to be passionate about our faith and passionate about the truth, following the commandments, following the doctrines and the teachings that Jesus gave us, without which we can't go to heaven. But we also have to be super incredibly nice and kind and loving and respectful, even in dialoguing with other people. You need both. You need the passion of truth and you need the passion of love. You can't have one without the other. Jesus said, if you don't pick up your cross and surrender and follow me in everything, he said, you are not worthy of me and you will not see heaven. So, I mean, just the new age counterfeit, oh, you just need to be spiritual. I don't need to go to church. I don't need to pray. I don't need to do those things. I'm spiritual. I pray at home. Really? Because Jesus said in John 6:51 through 65, if you don't receive the Eucharist, you're not going to heaven. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life. But if you don't, you already have no life within you. So also Matthew 28:19, Jesus said, go out and baptize all nations, commanding them everything I have instructed you, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. So all throughout the Bible, all throughout the teachings of Jesus, he tells us to be loving and to be one with each other, but also to follow the truth that he gave us. You can't have one without the other and still be on the road to heaven. It's a counterfeit road if it's just the road of nice, or the road of just, accept everybody no matter what.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, and to one of your points at about people, say Catholics, how they conduct themselves when you see them, or their personalities, or and related to that, just because somebody acts a certain way, or maybe is some people may be a little brash, or some people are very open and caring. We have different personalities. It doesn't make what we believe any less true. Right? Yeah, to your point. So yeah.
Exactly.
I really appreciate this, Bryan. Again, I'm glad that we had a chance to chat here today. Again, send me the book titles here too. I'll put links to them as well out there online. I'm going to pick them up and do my recommended readings on them. This has been great here, really. And of course, I'll still be watching, your channel, and maybe we'll get to catch up again sometime.
Yeah, that would be great. And maybe I'll check out your story on your conversion.
Yeah. Yeah, let's get ready for that one. Get some out.
Send me your YouTube channel.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again. We'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Take care. God bless.
Bye.